So definitely big things are happening in the world of AI these days, but we are going to have a quick conversation with Jared Coyle, the Chief AI Officer of SAP Americas. Not only talk about big things, but also some small things. Obviously, there are certain power plays and moves going on with organizations as they try to navigate what they need, who they need. I know you think you all know who I'm talking about with throwing money around these days to grab certain talent to make things work. But it's not just about the talent. It's also about the strategies that organizations are putting to bear and the directions they're taking. So today, Jared, thank you so much for making the time. I'm Jean-Pierre Ruth for Information Week, and we are going to be talking to Jared Coyle about some of the AI plans that SAP Americas have put into place. To Jared, so thank you so much for making the time for us today.
Awesome. Thank you, JP. Excited to be here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation together.
Gotcha. Great. So once again, sometimes where things are going, everyone wants to look at the biggest, the biggest weight, the biggest opportunity, the biggest resource that they can throw at when it comes to AI. But from what I understand, that SAP has actually looked at something, looking at the smaller side of things when it comes to models. Can you talk a bit about why it made sense, why it makes sense to leverage that as opposed to just diving headfirst and just trying to work at the biggest models possible to do the most devouring things possible out the gate?
That's a great question, and actually, we've often joked about this, where we kind of describe it as, listen, the best AI is contextual in its response, and you don't always have to swallow the internet whole every night to actually get that. And so, as we look at businesses, because obviously SAP is in the business space, we're not really focused on consumers necessarily. Most businesses have this set of data that describes their organization, from their finances to their supply chain to their HR. And when it comes to applying AI to that, it is a very discrete set of knowledge that you want in order to have that grounded context. And so we've invested heavily in smaller foundation models that can understand, those different areas of the business. And quite frankly, in what's called a knowledge graph. Computers don't magically know what a sales order is or what a purchase order is. They need to be able to understand that and then contextualize that when working with different models. And so we've taken that approach where instead of just being one massive model or one huge model, imagine a scenario wherein you can actually interact with a whole bunch of them. And that allows you to do the same thing that we humans do in a large organization. Talk to your peers to understand how the different areas of the business work.
Gotcha. Very, very interesting perspective. Because I, looking from the outside, so when I say, "Oh, SAP Americas," wow, that's you guys are very sizable. Why not just do get the most titanic, colossal, models in place to just do all the big things, and then wipe your hands of it. It's everything's magical, and it's you like snap your fingers like you're doing magic, and it's all going to work out. Is that not advisable, at least at this stage, for where we are with what AI is actually
definitely not advisable. If you just slap a random tool, so we're best known for our ERP system, which is finance and supply chain and a bunch of other data in it. And if you just slap a system onto that, it will make all sorts of responses up. And if you want to know the exact cash position that your organization is at, the last thing you need is for a made up number to come out of that system.
Gotcha. But if everyone else is doing it, isn't it to do that?
So I think that there's absolutely this perception of FOMO at the moment, in terms of there's this fear of like, we're going to miss out on this. And I think, the healthier way to think about this is, what is the intelligent way that I can apply the smarts of these systems to my business process? So instead of thinking it as, I'm just going to throw a whole bunch of data at it and just hope that it works, we need to provide a certain level of knowledge. What's the workflow? What is the way that you define how you store your things in your warehouse, your inventory, your legal structure? All of that matters. And the real richness comes from these systems once you've provided that level of context. And in our world, I like to think of SAP as a 52-year experiment in creating data sets for AI. Now, our data sets are very specific to that business process, but that's the point, because that's where the real magic occurs.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk about making that real magic happen. Smaller models. I want to say smaller tricks as like rabbit out of the hat versus making an entire stadium disappear. When we talk about like scales of magic, where do you start? Where does it begin? Where do you decide? Okay, we're working with smaller models, but like, is it a matter of saying like want to work picking your shot to say, okay, this is where we're going to start, see how it goes from here, and then proceed. How does that actually work out?
Sure. So I think a good way to think about it is to kind of follow the evolution of even how we've grown over the past few years in this space. And it all started in the areas where the data model was simplest and shared across the most organizations. So the areas we started first were in HR, because if you think about it, in HR, organizations have a lot of similar kind of aspects to their data models. It's not as different as like supply chain, right? Where every organization has its own competitive structure. And so in HR, it was all about, okay, where do we bring the capability of moving through a system, for organizations that have a lot of new users, through to how do I generate job descriptions? How do I, make sure that a conversation about compensation is done in an equitable and clear manner? All of those are really critical. And we combine small models, and we do use some of the larger models also because they're very good at natural language. And so when you combine the two, you really end up with that rigorous grounding to make sure that people only have access to what they should have access to, and then it understands the business process, but it still feels human because you used that larger model as well.
How do you kind of avoid the kind of shiny object syndrome, where somebody might say, hey, here's this element of AI that I heard about that is a new feature. Why don't we just jump on doing that too? Why don't we, chase the thing that everyone else, be like the dogs chasing the ambulance or the ice cream truck down the road. What are the things that you do to say, okay, yes, I'm just going to kind of.
No, I get, so like, I call it the AI dartboard.
Okay.
Is the way I describe it, because so many organizations come in and the leadership team and all the other teams are told, well, we're going to use AI. We need to use AI. We've been told that's how everything works. And they show up and they just throw dartboards, use cases. Hey, we could do this. We could do this. We could do this. Nobody takes a step back and says, what do we do as a company? What are the business capabilities that we need to execute on that? And which one of those steps is most amenable to the capabilities of what AI can do today? And I think when you step back and look at that, we have the advantage of right now we have a little over 34,000 organizations using our AI already. So we have insights into, what works and what doesn't work. I always like to say the best AI is boring, because it's the use cases that seem more boring that actually get adopted the most. It's the ones where the human behavior evolves with the usage of the tooling that actually get used. And so that is how we're looking at it now, is to say, here's an end-to-end process. It's not a dartboard of use cases. Here's your financials process. Here's your procurement and supply chain. Here's your HR hire to retire process. And how do we look at that holistically, then provide the use cases, and then deploy them in a way where the greatest value is realized the quickest?
Gotcha. And the effort to, AI being boring, how boring should we want it to be? Is it just a matter of like, the only ripple is that it's delivered on, the efficiency or that kind of like end goal of what you're hoping for, and everything else is just, operated smoothly, and, no one notices any other kind of difference?
I think we have to think in phases. And so, for a lot of organizations that are still, testing the waters of AI, it's a user experience improvement first. And then as you start to get people comfortable with it, then it becomes, I call that the boring phase, where you're going to introduce some capabilities, some automation, and some functionality that really allows you to operate more efficiently. And then in a more mature phase, is actually reimagining what you can do as a business, because you now have the ability to add intelligence to processes you didn't have before, whether that's intelligence in your pricing or intelligence in the way that your e-commerce site is set up. Those are the areas where you start to see those additional, maybe we could operate this business a little differently, but it's a maturity curve to get there.
Let's talk a bit for what you can, share in terms of actually working and developing these models. How much of this is bringing new talent in that have the skills? Because right now that seems to be on the top of mind for everybody right now, to find the people that can, deliver on putting, the machines and the models together that organizations need, or is it a matter of, developing up the folks who have been in house, or a combination of any of all these things, and is there a need for AI literacy across the board for organizations? I keep hearing a bit of that too.
So it's a little bit of all of the above. So one of the key areas is, yes, obviously we've invested in talent outside of our four walls, bringing in very specific skill sets that we need. But as a 100,000 plus person organization, we have a lot of internal talent. And quite frankly, especially in a lot of areas of AI, we have amazing talent because it's a space we've been in for 2 decades. It's not really new as it relates to the core technologies. And so there's bringing those new views, new talents, new technologies around some of these more advanced reasoning, learning, and other capabilities, combining that with the traditional AI and machine learning talent that we had to make sure that we can create those core capabilities. But then you're right. What we actually did is we also then said, well, wait a second, we have this army of innovation development talent who has been writing all these business applications for us for years. And so we also created kind of 2 ways that, one, what we called the playground, how do they get access to some of these tools and just start to use them? And then 2, a formalized training program across all of our product engineering teams to make sure that every single developer knows how they can access these AI capabilities now. Now, are they going to build their own advanced models? No, they're going to work with a specialized team to do that. But can they embed and make just endemic to the software those AI capabilities that are already there and ready to be used? Yes. And so that was our focus.
Okay. So I want to get back to what you're talking about with the, dealing with the dartboard when it comes to AI. Are we still in a phase where we are, collectively using the royal way? Not that I'm actually having a personal hand in AI, but are we still in a phase where we are shaking out like what is significant, substantial, realistic with, how AI is being deployed, what is being put towards, as opposed to, trying to make it do absolutely everything and make it be, the monkey's paw, the magic genie, there's so many other technologies that were supposed to fix everything, be everything. The whole, virtual metaverse thing that we were all talking about.
Metaverse to various forms of immutable chains to,
Yeah. So are we still shaking out, like saying, like, I mean, it seems like you're taking a very grounded approach, but it's still shaking out some things, but like, okay, some things are not as relevant as might have been originally thought when it comes to like what AI should be put towards.
I do think it's important that we be realists about where we're at with the technology. However, I think, one of the really, if you have seen online, it's popular on social media at the moment, the auto generation of videos where, even a couple months ago, the generation of a gymnast doing flips would have, a very unnatural thing where the face would flip around every time they're doing a flip.
And 16 fingers on their hand.
Yeah, all of those aspects. And if you generate it with the most modern, capabilities today, you've seen that that's already been addressed. And so I kind of view this in 2 buckets. In bucket number 1, we as leaders in organizations responsible for fostering, at SAP, 52 years of excellence, we have to make sure that we're applying technology that is real, that is applicable, and that real humans can use today to become what I like to think of as superhuman or creative generalists. And so that is real. There is real technology that can improve everything from the user experience to how a process operates to whether or not you actually need someone sitting there counting every single item in your warehouse. All that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can they also sit there and run a business soup to nuts and have the strategy and creativity and all of that that's there? We're not quite there yet. And I think, a number of recent publications, for instance, there was a really interesting publication recently from Anthropic, one of our partners, who they posted, that they tried to have a model, in their case, Claude, run an end-to-end business.
Mm-hmm.
And, it actually lost significant amount of money as a percentage of what they started with. And so it's really critical to realize that human reasoning combined with this machine reasoning and knowledge capability is really where the magic happens today and for the foreseeable future.
Gotcha. What are some of the, I would say not so much guardrails, but what are really some of the constraints that you're seeing in terms of what AI is doing now, where you'd like it to go next, where you like it, the capabilities you'd like to see next? Is it a matter of resources of personnel, technology? There's various uses of AI right now, and there's that segment of folks that are looking at particularly folks in the generative AI kind of space, wanting to be able, I'll be blunt, they want access to lots of different things that they can scrape so they can train their AI to then,
right.
Make poor copies of Studio Ghibli movies. Yes, I said it.
I'm going to claim guilty on that one.
How dare you? But for the SAP space, and actually, which also hopefully speaks more to like the broader enterprise space of things. What are the things that you're saying? Like, okay, we need more access to this, or we would like to see more of that. What are the current boundaries, and hoping like there will be some evolution of whatever it needs to happen to then help further along to really kind of like get further down the road on the path that you're on.
Sure. We have actually a very tangible example of this in terms of, one of the areas is there's two areas. You don't want data silos to exist across organizations. You want the free sharing of data, but you want it done in a way where somebody can't go to your company's Copilot and ask it, how much does every single person in this company make? And it answers. Mm-hmm. And so there's that balance that has to occur. And so, in our worlds, we've actually, in February, we announced a release of what we call our business data cloud. And we announced the collaboration with Databricks, with something we're calling SAP Databricks, where we take these essentially these data products and expose them in a healthy manner so that they can be used, but in a governed way with the wider ecosystem of lakehouse architectures that exist within most organizations. So we strongly believe in that kind of open approach, allowing for the data to be exposed, but we also are realists about the fact that it needs to be done in a way which makes sure that both people's privacy is protected and the organization's intellectual property and competitive advantaged data isn't exposed to the wider world.
Gotcha. This may or may not be a direct matter for SAP, but definitely that there's various talks of like, the hardware side of things, the power side of things. Is that something that you're finding that like, hey, there might be some limits there, or at least some things to like speak to, plan for, try to address to allow you that runway, but then also,
Yes, I think that it is fair, for us to have the conversation about the type of footprint that we're creating with this technology. And when you look at it from that perspective, there's an advantage. It's to hearkening back to the beginning of our talk. One of the key areas that we've invested in is smaller models, knowledge graphs, things that are less computationally intensive and still have the same quality of response. And so as an organization that has been heavily invested in making sure that we have minimized our footprint and are carbon neutral, especially as an organization based out of the European Union, which tends to be a little bit more progressive in this matter, it's been a major strategy for us. Now, listen, there are advantages to some of the high computational requirements as well for some of the models. And so I think it's a balanced approach. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I kind of look at it as if you think about the evolution of just core computing capabilities, we used to fill warehouses just to calculate the trajectory of a rocket ship to get to the moon. And we now have more compute power in our hands with our phone. And so I really do look at this as an evolution. Yes, we're scaling up right now. We're adding all these capabilities. And so you see this particularly from the organizations that are building massive data centers around this. But as we have seen the evolution of models, I think you're going to see that increasing granularity that allows them to be energy efficient, the creation of new chips, which we're already seeing, that are both computationally advantaged and energy efficient. And so I'm actually quite positive and bullish on the fact that these challenges will be addressed in a way that is, responsible as it relates to society overall.
Gotcha. And one more question for you. Does it feel like we are still in that hyper scale up time where there's a lot of attention here. Part of me wants to still compare it to like the very early days of the interwebs when pets.com was taking off and eToys was all the rage and things were escalating really fast, and then we all had a moment of where does it feel like where we are right now, and really what makes the most sense in terms of like how you're approaching the attention and the trajectory that we're on for AI?
I think it's a great question. If we go back, let's follow the analogy. The largest companies in the planet today, a large percentage of them are from that era. And so, yes, there was a lot of noise. There was a lot of growth. There's hyper growth in areas. There was hype. And then there was the reality of what was possible. And then there was what do consumers or companies latch onto versus what they don't. We are absolutely in that phase of hyper growth. However, if we look at it, 20 years out, does this mean that it's not going to exist? No. I think this is fundamentally different than some of the other fads we've seen over the past few years, because it isn't really an immediate fad. It came to everybody's attention because they used ChatGPT and it felt natural. But this is a process that started in the 50s with some mathematicians, moved to the 80s, where we started to get some better theories about how it could work. And only in the past decade and a half or so did we have the requisite compute to make it real. But this is a trajectory that's been running for a long time. And I'm just excited that people have finally realized it. As someone who was excited about it before it was cool, I always joke that, before ChatGPT, we were a bunch of former physicists in a room with no windows. And now we're speaking in stadiums. And so I think, it's more that people have come to realize the possibility of what's there. And yes, some of it is going to fall to the wayside. We're going to realize that was nice, but those cat videos weren't really needed. And so I'm excited to kind of see both. And listen, every company, SAP included, is going to make some really great calls and some calls that we learn in retrospect could have been better.
Gotcha. Well, here's hoping that at the very least, if we need to, we can distract Skynet and HAL 9000 with making bad Studio Ghibli generative AI movies before they take over the planet. So listen, Jared, all jokes aside, thank you so much for your perspective and sharing how you're approaching AI at SAP Americas. I appreciate the time.
JP, thank you as well.